Mexican authorities pursuing their case against an American suspected of killing an acquaintance at a luxury resort. They're looking to extradite the suspect to face charges. ABC's Zareen Shaw joins us with more as that woman still hasn't been named. Zareen, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Janae. A 25-year-old went down to Mexico with some friends to celebrate someone's birthday. And just one day into that vacation, she turned up dead. And now officials have another big problem on their hands. Their prime suspect is no longer in the country.
On October 28, 2022, Shanquella Robinson, a 25-year-old entrepreneur from Charlotte, North Carolina, arrived in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, with a group of acquaintances for what was described as a vacation. Less than 24 hours later, Robinson was pronounced dead inside the luxury villa where the group was staying. In the hours following her death, members of the group informed her family that she had died from alcohol poisoning. As authorities began reviewing the case, inconsistencies quickly emerged, including conflicting accounts of where Robinson was located when she became unresponsive, who contacted medical assistance, and how long she was treated before death was declared. A subsequent Mexican autopsy determined that Robinson died from severe spinal cord injury and vertebral dislocation, findings that directly contradicted the initial explanation provided to her family. Shortly afterward, a viral video surfaced appearing to show Robinson being physically assaulted inside the villa. Investigations were opened by authorities in Mexico and the United States. Yet despite international attention, the circumstances surrounding Robinson's death remain unresolved. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds. Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin.
Good evening. I'm Shanquella Robinson's mother, Salamandra Robinson. And I would like each and every one of you, if you can, anything you can do, step in and help us with justice. We need justice for Shanquella Robinson. It has been 2 years, and there's no reason that no one has not been arrested yet, and I need justice for my child. Thank you.
Shanquella Robinson was 25 years old at the time of her death. She was born on January 9, 1997, and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. She grew up in a close-knit family environment and remained strongly connected to her parents throughout her adult life. Family members describe her as independent and self-driven, with a clear focus on building a stable future for herself. Robinson attended Winston-Salem State University, a historically black college in North Carolina. During her time in college, she developed interests beyond academics, particularly in entrepreneurship and branding. Although she did not pursue a traditional corporate career path after school, her education helped shape her approach to business and personal branding. Following college, Robinson focused on small business ownership. She operated a fashion and beauty brand that included clothing resale, hair braiding, and styling services. She handled most aspects of her business independently, including marketing, customer engagement, and inventory management. Her work reflected a growing trend among young entrepreneurs using social media platforms to promote lifestyle brands. Robinson maintained an active presence on social media, where she shared curated images of travel, fashion, fitness, and everyday life. Her online presence projected confidence, independence, and financial self-sufficiency. She frequently posted content that suggested personal growth, stability, and enjoyment of travel experiences. There were no public indications of distress or conflict in the days leading up to her trip to Mexico. Her relationships with friends appeared long-standing. Several individuals in her social circle had known her for years, including those who later traveled with her. There were no public reports of serious disputes or estrangement prior to the trip. Robinson regularly communicated with her family and often shared details of her travel plans with them. Within her community, Robinson was known as a business-minded individual who was focused on growth. She was viewed as responsible, organized, and cautious, particularly when traveling. She had traveled previously without incident and was familiar with coordinating group trips. Robinson's future plans included expanding her business, increasing travel, and continuing to operate independently. She was not financially dependent on others and generally made her own decisions. Her decision to travel to Cabo San Lucas was based on trust in the people accompanying her. These were individuals she considered friends, some of whom she had socialized with and traveled with before. There was no indication that she believed the trip posed any risk. The Cabo San Lucas trip was organized as a group vacation. Planning took place in advance, with coordination involving flights, lodging, and shared expenses. The trip was presented as a leisure getaway, not a business trip or a special event. One or more members of the group took responsibility for arranging accommodations and travel logistics. Financial arrangements appear to be shared, with each traveler responsible for their portion of expenses. A luxury villa was selected, suggesting a higher budget trip. There is no indication that Robinson expressed concern over costs or planning details. The travel group consisted of 7 people in total, including Robinson. The individuals were described as friends or acquaintances, some of whom had known each other for several years. The group dynamic appeared familiar, with prior social interactions among members. No confirmed reports indicate serious tension or disputes among the group before departure. However, not all interpersonal dynamics were publicly known. There were no documented arguments or conflicts reported to Robinson's family before she left the United States. The itinerary involved flying from the U.S. to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, with plans to stay for several days. Robinson informed her family about the trip and shared basic details, including the destination and the people she was traveling with. Her final conversations before departure did not raise concerns. She appeared confident and expected to return home after the vacation. The group arrived in Cabo San Lucas on October 28, 2022. After landing, they traveled to a private villa located in a resort area known for short-term luxury rentals. The villa was a multi-room property designed to accommodate groups, with shared common spaces and private bedrooms. Following arrival, the group settled into the villa. Initial activities included unpacking, socializing, and resting after travel. There is limited confirmed information about specific activities during the first evening, but there were no reports of immediate conflict upon arrival. Social interactions within the group appeared normal based on available information. Robinson communicated briefly with her family after arrival, indicating that she had reached the destination safely. This communication occurred within hours of arrival and did not suggest any problems. There are no confirmed reports of Robinson expressing discomfort or fear during the first night. Any internal group tensions, if present, were not documented at that time. All members of the group remained at the villa overnight. Robinson's final known communications occurred either late on the night of arrival or early the following day. After that point, no further messages were sent by her directly. On the morning of October 29, 2022, events inside the villa began to change. At some point, Robinson was reported to be unwell. Accounts differ regarding the exact time this was noticed and the nature of her condition. Some members of the group later stated that Robinson appeared ill, possibly related to alcohol consumption. Others described her condition as involving fatigue or sickness. These explanations were not consistent across statements. There are conflicting claims about who first noticed that something was wrong. It is unclear whether Robinson herself asked for help or whether others observed her condition. Reports vary on whether she was conscious and communicating at the time concerns were raised. There were delays in seeking medical assistance. Instead of immediately contacting emergency services, a decision was made to call a local doctor to come to the villa. The doctor arrived later that day and conducted an examination. The medical professional reportedly observed that Robinson was unresponsive and showed signs of severe distress. The doctor recommended that she be transported to a hospital for further treatment. Despite this recommendation, Robinson was not immediately taken to a hospital. At a later point, paramedics were contacted and arrived at the villa. They attempted resuscitation efforts, including CPR. These efforts were unsuccessful. Robinson was officially pronounced dead at the villa.
Some breaking news just into our newsroom within the past hour. We're learning that the Charlotte FBI field office has officially opened an investigation into the death of a woman on vacation in Cabo, Mexico back in October. Now, Queen City News first brought you the story about Shanquella Robinson's mysterious death last week. As anchor Morgan Francis reports, police investigating the case are sharing what they've discovered so far.
Thursday, Mexican authorities told Queen City News Shanquella Robinson's friends lied to them about what happened to her prior to her untimely death on October 29th. An officer investigating the case says they interviewed two friends at the villa in Cabo who said Shanquella Robinson had alcohol poisoning. The same story her family says they told them.
They said she wasn't feeling well. She had alcohol poisoning. They couldn't get a pulse.
It wasn't until her autopsy came back that Mexican police discovered she had a severe spinal cord injury and atlas luxation, which is instability in the uppermost vertebrae. They also didn't see this video showing Robinson get violently assaulted until Wednesday. For that reason, their investigation is still open and they're looking into her death.
There's a huge financial incentive to keep Cabo open and to keep people feeling safe. So to the extent they can find, prosecute, incarcerate the people that did this, in my opinion, they're going to try to do it.
Kurt Kearns is an international attorney with experience litigating international crimes and investigations. Some of what he has to say might not be the most promising news.
It's a sovereign state. So that's the first misunderstanding a lot of people have, is that, hey, man, if I'm an American and I'm in trouble somewhere, boy, they'll come to my rescue. And the reality is not unless there's a really big interest internationally in coming to your rescue, because they will not upset international relations with a sovereign nation just to help out.
The police officer investigating the case tells Queen City News if they find evidence that leads to an arrest, they have authority to bring the group back to Mexico and, quote, they will have to answer to Mexican law. While the FBI and U.S. State Department say it's not their jurisdiction, it doesn't mean they can't investigate either.
Upon invitation, FBI can come in and assist. Upon, invitation, the State Department can get more and more involved, but it's only upon invitation, i.e., do they want us there?
That was Morgan Francis reporting. Police again are urging anyone with information to contact the local FBI office, and they will relay that information on to Mexican authorities.
The time of death was recorded by local authorities. Following her death, law enforcement was notified, and an initial report was generated. This marked the end of the immediate timeline of events and the beginning of a prolonged investigation, marked by conflicting accounts and unanswered questions. In the hours following Shanquella Robinson's death in Cabo San Lucas, phone calls were made to her parents in the United States by individuals who had traveled with her. According to her family, these calls conveyed a brief and consistent explanation. Robinson had become ill, consumed excessive alcohol, and later died as a result of alcohol poisoning. No mention was made of any physical altercation, injury, or emergency incident beyond intoxication. The information provided was limited, generalized, and lacking specific medical detail. The tone used during these calls was described by the family as controlled and restrained. The callers did not indicate panic, urgency, or confusion, nor did they suggest that the situation involved violence or trauma. Statements were framed as unfortunate, but natural consequences of excessive drinking. No detailed timeline was offered, and no clear explanation was provided regarding how Robinson's condition escalated so rapidly or why medical intervention was unsuccessful. Almost immediately, inconsistencies began to emerge. Different individuals reportedly gave slightly varied accounts of where Robinson was when she became ill, who was present at the time, and how long she'd been unwell before help was summoned. Some statements suggested she was alone in her room, while others implied she was surrounded by the group. These variations raised concern for her family, particularly because no one could provide a precise sequence of events. Another issue was the lack of documentation. The family was not initially provided with official medical records, police reports, or death certificates. Requests for basic information, such as the name of the attending doctor, the time of death, or the cause listed by local authorities, were either delayed or unanswered. This absence of immediate clarity caused Robinson's parents to question the accuracy of what they had been told. As the days passed, the family's suspicion increased. The explanation of alcohol poisoning did not align with Robinson's health history or lifestyle, according to those closest to her. Repeated requests were made for documentation from Mexican authorities and for clarification from those who had been with her. These requests marked the beginning of a prolonged effort by the family to obtain official records and independent confirmation of the circumstances surrounding her death. The initial death report filed by local authorities in Mexico listed Robinson's death as the result of cardiopulmonary arrest. Early documentation did not clearly identify an external cause of injury, reinforcing the narrative that her death was related to illness or intoxication. This report was shared with U.S. officials and relayed to the family, further supporting the initial alcohol-related explanation. However, a later autopsy conducted by Mexican forensic authorities produced findings that differed significantly from the early reports. According to this autopsy, Robinson died from a severe spinal cord injury and dislocation at the upper cervical vertebrae. The report concluded that the injury was consistent with violent trauma and stated that death occurred within a short time frame following the injury, estimated at approximately 15 minutes. Based on these findings, Mexican authorities classified the death as violent. This classification directly contradicted the earlier narrative of alcohol poisoning and raised questions about how such a severe injury could have occurred without being mentioned in initial accounts. The presence of spinal trauma suggested a physical force that was not accidental in nature, according to the forensic assessment. Robinson's body was later returned to the United States, where a second autopsy was conducted. The U.S. autopsy findings differed in key areas. While it documented swelling of the brain and evidence of hypoxic injury, it did not confirm the same spinal damage described in the Mexican report. The cause of death was ultimately listed as undetermined, citing the inability to reconcile the findings conclusively. These discrepancies created significant uncertainty. Two official autopsies conducted in different countries produced conflicting conclusions regarding both the cause and mechanism of death. One described a fatal spinal injury caused by trauma. The other did not definitively identify that injury. The absence of a single agreed-upon cause of death complicated both criminal and civil investigations and left critical questions unresolved. Medical experts and legal analysts noted that such discrepancies can arise due to differences in examination methods, timing, and interpretation. However, in this case, the differences were substantial enough to impact the direction of legal proceedings. Without a unified medical conclusion, authorities face challenges in assigning responsibility or pursuing charges. Several weeks after Robinson's death, a video surfaced online showing a physical altercation involving a woman later identified by her family as Robinson. The recording appeared to have been taken inside the villa where the group was staying. The footage showed Robinson being struck repeatedly while others were present in the room. Family members publicly confirmed that the woman in the video was Robinson. This confirmation shifted public reception of the case and directly contradicted the initial claim that her death resulted from alcohol poisoning. The location of the recording aligned to the accommodations used during the trip, placing the incident in close proximity to where she died. The behavior of others present in the video drew particular attention. Individuals can be seen standing nearby without intervening. Verbal statements are audible, including remarks directed at Robinson, while no effort is made to stop the altercation. The absence of intervention raised questions about group dynamics and responsibility. The timing of the video became a key issue. While it was not definitively established when the recording was made, it was widely believed to have occurred shortly before Robinson's death. This raised further questions about whether the injuries shown in the video were connected to the fatal spinal trauma described in the Mexican autopsy. Once the video spread publicly, reaction was immediate and widespread. Calls for accountability increased, and the earlier narrative of accidental death was openly challenged. Robinson's family stated that the footage validated their concerns and confirmed that critical information had been withheld from them. Debate also emerged over whether additional recordings existed. Some observers speculated that more footage may have been recorded but not released. While no additional videos were officially confirmed, the possibility contributed to ongoing suspicion and demands for transparency. Shortly after Robinson's death, the individuals who traveled with her returned to the United States. No arrests were made before their departure, and there was no public indication that they were detained or formally questioned by Mexican authorities at that time. Their ability to leave the country quickly became a focal point of criticism. In the period following their return, conflicting public statements emerged. Some individuals maintained the original account of alcohol-related illness, while others avoided public commentary altogether. As scrutiny increased, social media accounts linked to those involved were either deactivated, restricted, or scrubbed of content related to the trip. Over time, communication from Robinson's travel companions diminished. Legal representatives began speaking on behalf of some individuals, signaling a shift toward legal distancing. Direct engagement with the family or the public largely ceased. Following the release of the video, efforts were made by some parties to reframe the incident as accidental or unrelated to Robinson's death. These explanations introduced new versions of events that differed from both the initial alcohol poisoning claim and the conclusions of the Mexican autopsy. The combination of rapid departures, inconsistent statements, and prolonged silence further complicated the case. Without immediate accountability measures in place, critical questions surrounding Robinson's final hours remained unanswered. Following the death of Shanquella Robinson in Cabo San Lucas in October 2022, Mexican authorities initially treated the case as a sudden medical death. Early reports referenced alcohol-related causes, a conclusion that aligned with statements provided by the individuals who traveled with her. However, as inconsistencies began to surface and official medical findings became available, the direction of the investigation changed significantly. Mexican forensic authorities conducted an autopsy that identified severe trauma to the upper spinal cord and neck region. The findings indicated that the injury was catastrophic and inconsistent with accidental causes, such as intoxication or illness. Based on this evidence, prosecutors in the Mexican state of Baja California reclassified the case from a natural or accidental death to a homicide. The reclassification marked a turning point. Prosecutors determined that the injuries were consistent with violent force and occurred shortly before death. As a result, Mexican authorities issued an arrest warrant for one individual connected to the trip, charging them under laws related to gender-based violence, commonly referred to as femicide. Under Mexican law, femicide applies when a woman's death is linked to violence motivated by gender or occurs under circumstances involving abuse or power imbalance. Following the issuance of the arrest warrant, Mexican officials initiated international legal procedures to locate and apprehend the suspect. This included coordination with international law enforcement agencies and notification to foreign governments. However, the suspect was believed to have already returned to the United States by the time the warrant was issued, complicating enforcement efforts. Extradition emerged as a major obstacle. For extradition to proceed, both countries must meet specific legal standards, including sufficient admissible evidence and alignment with treaty requirements. Differences between Mexican and U.S. legal thresholds, combined with the need for cooperation between jurisdictions, slowed progress. No extradition has occurred to date. Initially, Mexican officials provided public updates confirming the homicide classification and arrest warrant. Over time, communication became less frequent. No further arrests were announced, and no public trial proceedings began. The investigation remained technically open, but visible progress diminished, leading to questions about the status and momentum of the case. In parallel with the Mexican investigation, U.S. authorities opened a federal inquiry into Shanquella Robinson's death. The Federal Bureau of Investigation initiated its review shortly after her body was returned to the United States. The scope of the investigation focused on determining whether any U.S. federal laws had been violated and whether prosecution was possible within U.S. jurisdiction. Federal investigators examined medical records from both Mexico and the United States, including autopsy findings that differed in key conclusions. While the Mexican autopsy cited a fatal spinal injury, the U.S. autopsy did not conclusively identify the same cause. Instead, it noted swelling of the brain and lack of oxygen, but did not definitively attribute the injuries to assault. These discrepancies complicated efforts to establish a single, legally actionable cause of death. Investigators also reviewed video evidence that had circulated publicly. The footage showed a physical altercation involving Robinson inside the villa where she was staying. The FBI analyzed the video for authenticity, timing, and relevance to the fatal injuries. However, determining whether the recorded incident directly caused the injuries cited in the autopsy proved challenging. The FBI conducted interviews with individuals who traveled with Robinson, as well as others connected to the trip. Statements collected during these interviews varied and, in some cases, conflicted with earlier accounts. Despite these inconsistencies, federal prosecutors face limitations in establishing criminal liability under U.S. law for actions that occurred outside the country. Jurisdiction emerged as a critical issue. Most of the alleged conduct took place on foreign soil, placing primary legal authority with Mexican courts. For U.S. prosecutors to bring charges, they would need clear evidence of federal crime with jurisdictional reach, such as conspiracy or actions taken within the United States that directly contributed to the death. Investigators ultimately concluded that the available evidence did not meet that standard. In April 2023, U.S. federal prosecutors announced that they would not file criminal charges. The decision was based on insufficient evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt under U.S. law. Officials emphasized that the decision did not equate to a determination of innocence, but reflected legal limitations. The public response to the announcement was immediate and critical. Many questioned how video evidence and conflicting medical findings could fail to meet prosecutorial standards. Calls for transparency and accountability intensified following the decision. In response to the lack of criminal charges, Shanquella Robinson's family pursued civil litigation. They filed wrongful death lawsuits against the individuals who traveled with her, alleging negligence, failure to provide medical assistance, and coordinated efforts to conceal the circumstances surrounding her death. The civil complaints outlined claims that Robinson was placed in a dangerous situation, that medical care was delayed, and that misleading information was provided to authorities and family members. The lawsuit sought financial damages and accountability through civil court rather than criminal prosecution. In addition to suing individuals, the family also filed legal actions against U.S. federal agencies. These lawsuits alleged investigative failures, lack of transparency, and negligence in handling the case. The family argued that authorities failed to properly pursue evidence and did not adequately coordinate with Mexican officials. Federal agencies responded by filing motions to dismiss, citing sovereign immunity and jurisdictional protections. Courts reviewed whether the agencies could be held legally responsible for investigative decisions. In subsequent rulings, some claims were partially dismissed, while others were allowed to proceed in limited form. Jurisdictional disputes became central to the civil cases. Courts examined whether U.S. or Mexican law should apply, and whether American courts had authority over events that occurred abroad. These disputes slowed the legal process and narrowed the scope of potential outcomes. As of the most recent developments, the civil cases remain ongoing, with no final judgments resolving liability or responsibility. The legal process continues to move through procedural stages rather than substantive findings of fault. Media coverage played a significant role in sustaining attention on the case. Social media platforms became central hubs for discussion, information sharing, and advocacy. Hashtags calling for justice circulated widely, keeping the case visible long after official updates slowed. National and international news outlets covered the story extensively, particularly after the release of video evidence and the announcement that no federal charges would be filed. Coverage varied in tone and interpretation, with some reports focusing on legal limitations while others emphasized unanswered questions. Conflicting narratives emerged. Official statements cited insufficient evidence and jurisdictional constraints, while public commentary often focused on perceived failures and accountability. These competing narratives contributed to ongoing debate about the effectiveness of cross-border justice. Public pressure influenced how authorities communicated about the case, though it did not alter legal outcomes. Comparisons were frequently drawn to other cases involving U.S. citizens who died abroad under suspicious circumstances, highlighting broader concerns about international legal cooperation. Despite sustained attention, the case remains unresolved in both criminal and civil contexts. Media coverage continues to revisit the case as new legal filings emerge, reinforcing its status as an example of the complexities and limitations of international justice systems. Despite multiple investigations, public attention, and legal actions, the death of Shanquella Robinson remains surrounded by unanswered questions. Central to the case is the cause of the spinal injury cited in the Mexican autopsy. Authorities concluded that Robinson died from severe spinal cord injury and dislocation of the vertebrae, an injury typically associated with significant force. However, no official explanation has established exactly how such an injury occurred. There was no report of fall from a height vehicle accident or other documented incident that would normally explain this level of trauma. Equally unresolved is the timing of the injury. Mexican forensic findings suggested that death occurred shortly after the spinal injury was sustained, raising questions about whether the injury happened close to the time emergency services were contacted or earlier, during an undocumented period inside the villa. Without a verified timeline supported by consistent witness accounts, the sequence of events remains unclear. Another critical question concerns who was present at the moment the injury occurred. Robinson traveled with a group of acquaintances, all of whom were staying at the same villa. No independent witnesses outside the group have been identified, and no official account has clarified whether all members were present, partially present, or absent during the incident. The lack of a clear record of who was in the room or nearby at the time of injury continues to complicate accountability. Emergency response decisions also remain unexplained. Reports indicate that a medical professional was contacted before Robinson was transported to a hospital, and that hospitalization was recommended. However, there was a delay before emergency services were involved. Why immediate hospital care was not pursued, who made that decision, and whether the delay affected the outcome have not been conclusively addressed in any official findings. Early statements given to Robinson's family further deepened uncertainty. Family members were initially told that Robinson died from alcohol poisoning. This explanation was later contradicted by autopsy findings that showed no such cause of death. The discrepancy between early verbal accounts and later forensic conclusions has never been formally reconciled. Authorities have not clarified whether the early statements were based on assumptions, misinformation, or intentional misrepresentation. One of the most publicly discussed aspects of the case is the existence of video evidence showing a physical altercation involving Robinson. Despite the circulation of this footage, no criminal charges have been filed in the United States. Prosecutors stated that available evidence did not meet the legal standard required for prosecution. This decision has led to continued debate about the evidentiary threshold, jurisdictional authority, and whether all relevant materials were fully considered. Questions also remain about evidence that has not been released. Full investigative files, unedited video footage, detailed witness statements, and forensic documentation have not been made public in their entirety. Without access to these materials, the public and Robinson's family are unable to independently assess the completeness of the investigations. Finally, the role of diplomatic and legal obstacles remains unresolved. The death occurred outside the United States, placing the case at the intersection of two legal systems. Differences in investigative procedures, extradition requirements, and prosecutorial standards may have influenced outcomes. Whether these constraints were unavoidable legal realities or barriers that limited accountability remains an open question. Beyond the specifics of Robinson's death, the case highlights broader safety concerns for travelers abroad. When individuals travel internationally in private groups, particularly without structured oversight, responsibility for safety often becomes unclear. The case underscores the risks associated with relying solely on companions for protection, medical decisions, and accurate reporting during emergencies. The situation also raises questions about accountability in group travel scenarios. When harm occurs within a closed group and all witnesses are personally connected, investigations may rely heavily on potentially conflicting statements. This dynamic can complicate fact-finding, especially when no independent witnesses or surveillance footage is available. The case illustrates the limits of international justice. Crimes involving foreign nationals can fall into jurisdictional gaps, where neither country fully assumes responsibility. Differences in legal definitions, evidentiary standards, and prosecutorial discretion can result in outcomes that leave cases unresolved, even when significant evidence exists. Treatment of violent deaths involving U.S. citizens overseas remains a point of concern. While federal agencies may investigate, their ability to prosecute is constrained by where the crime occurred and by international law. Families often face prolonged uncertainty, limited transparency, and restricted legal options. The role of public exposure versus legal outcomes is also evident. Social media and public advocacy brought global attention to Robinson's case and pressured authorities to respond. However, visibility did not translate into criminal charges. The case demonstrates that public awareness can amplify scrutiny but does not guarantee legal resolution. The case of Shanquella Robinson remains defined by contradictions and unresolved facts, conflicting explanations of her cause of death, discrepancies between early statements and forensic findings, unclear timelines, and the absence of criminal charges continue to raise questions that have not been formally answered. For Robinson's family, the lack of resolution has had lasting consequences. In the absence of criminal accountability, they have pursued civil litigation and continued public advocacy in an effort to obtain clarity and responsibility. Their actions reflect the limited avenues available when criminal proceedings do not advance. Ongoing calls for accountability persist because critical elements of the case remain undisclosed or unexplained. Each unanswered question reinforces a perception that the official narrative is incomplete. The case remains relevant not only because of what happened, but because of what has not been resolved. It stands as an example of how deaths occurring across borders can result in prolonged uncertainty, even in the presence of evidence and international attention. Ultimately, the enduring issue is not solely the loss of life, but the absence of definitive, transparent account of how that loss occurred. Until those gaps are addressed, the case remains officially open in the public conscience, even if legal proceedings have stalled. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.